Welcome to Make Your Own Fun. I am here with poet and author and professor of creative writing at Mount Santonio College. We've got John Brantingham here. Thank you so much. Um, and I'd like to start today with like a half serious question. It's a good icebreaker here because when I read this in your bio, I went, wait a minute, this is a thing. So in your bio, I stumbled across the fact that you are the former poet laureate of not one, but two national parks. And when I read that, I said, well, wait a minute. I know you could be a poet laureate of a city, of a state, of the country. I didn't know that you could be the poet laureate of a national park. And at first, my first reaction was, what sorcery is this? Um, so tell me, how does that come about, and how does someone approach you about that? I am so ignorant about that.
Well, that was interesting. There have been, I believe, three poet laureates for national parks, and Sequoia Kings Canyon. They're two different parks, but they're run together. They form one contiguous kind of thing. And if you just think of Yosemite, but higher and much more beautiful, is the way I describe it. That's Sequoia and Kings Canyon. And I had been volunteering for them for years, and I'd been kind of functioning as the poet laureate. And so they had heard of somebody who was a poet laureate in Acadia. And so they said, why don't we start a program here? And I said, well, I'd be thrilled. I think that sounds really wonderful. So yeah, I'd been I guess it was almost 10 years before I'd been working with them. And I did this thing where I would, this is back when I lived in California and taught
Mhm.
with Mount SAC. I'd come in and I'd teach 1 week classes where people would come in and learn how to write poetry. And I teach them about the woods, and we'd learn about caves, which there are a lot of in California. And we brought in whole groups of deaf and hard of hearing students and kind of introduced them to this stuff. And it was a really, really wonderful part of my life. And then they said, well, you're doing all this stuff. Why don't we make it official? And so that was great. And so I did that for about 2 years, and it didn't change what I was doing much, but it was just really wonderful and gratifying to have that be, have that recognition from the people I've been working with.
Oh yeah. Well, it also looks great on a CV, and I have to say, it's a good conversation starter, that's for sure. So
Yeah.
let me jump into this because I really wanted to pick your brain about this because I know you've been writing and getting published for a long time, doing open mics and things like that. So I've asked a few other writers this, and I'm always curious about the answer, which is how has presenting your work to the public changed since the COVID-19 lockdown in terms of what you have to use, just Zooms, or are you doing less in-person presentations?
Yeah, I'm certainly doing more Zoom. One of the ways that it opened up. So I moved from Los Angeles to a very, very small town. I think they think it's big here. It's called Jamestown, New York, and it's about 30,000 people, as opposed to the suburb that I was living in that nobody had ever heard of before, that was 100,000 people. But it's this out in the middle of Western New York, a very rural area. And so when I moved here, I just left my job and I moved here because of COVID, actually, because we'd been in the lockup for so long, and I wanted to rethink priorities. And I had tenure, but like, is this what I want to do? So we moved out here and it made reading in California still possible for me,
Mm.
which was great because I got to. It's so interesting. I've moved 3,000 miles from my family and my friends, and I still have such a connection with them. It's great. And so I can Zoom with them. I still meet with my writing group in LA, all that stuff. But it's made that part really good. I think Zoom is a wonderful thing. I don't want to talk about, but I think it hinders communication in a lot of ways. It makes it really difficult to teach a class or to have real communication. And I found teaching on it was very difficult for me because I spent 30 years learning how to read people's body language and expressions. And now we're kind of just staring, and we have the same sort of passive responses as like watching television.
Right.
Um,
Let me
yeah,
piggyback on that and say, or I guess ask, are you getting out in the local area, local colleges, coffee shops, poetry readings, things like that, and kind of, sampling what the local flavor is in terms of the writers?
yeah, I live very, very close to a place called Chautauqua Institution. It's about 10 miles away from me. And Chautauqua is this place that in the summer, I don't know how many of the listeners or if you know it well. Some people know it intimately well, but nobody in California seems to know it. But it's what it's most famous for now, depressingly, is it's where Salman Rushdie was stabbed.
Mm.
But it's kind of it's got that vibe, not the stabbing part, the Salman Rushdie part. It's it's all summer long. They call it the season. It's 9 weeks. They have writers, poets, artists, singers, and so and you'll have multiple stages a day. And so they've brought me in to teach some classes, and I also go and I do some readings there, and that's been really great. That's been really my biggest source of meeting people who are in the arts. And this year I got a grant from New York State where I'm going to be teaching and writing about the forests of Western New York.
Okay.
Um, so it gives me a chance to interact with people. Whereas otherwise, there are some readings, but they are kind of few and far between, just because there aren't a whole lot of people in this area.
Mm.
And so I could go to Buffalo, but that's a major commitment. That's 4 hours just in driving, 2 hours
Yeah.
one way, 2 hours back.
I can relate to
And
that. I just moved to where I'm at in Aiken, South Carolina. I kind of know the area a little bit because I've been here a little over a month. But I mean, I know there are colleges in the area, there are coffee shops, but just not really tied in, connected, or anything. So it's going to have to be like it was 20 years ago, where you just kind of
yeah.
stumble upon something, or you're out somewhere and somebody says something and you kind of go, huh? Um, so,
Yeah, that's it.
you
Yeah,
know,
and as a person in his 50s, I find it, it's not like in your 20s, you just kind of walk into rooms, say, hey, everybody, I'm here. And
right.
people have kind of established relationships in the area. And so, and they've been doing the thing they've been doing for a long time.
Yeah.
So that works slowly. I'm working again though. I'm teaching at the local community college.
Okay.
I'm teaching at the prison through the community college, which has been interesting. But I'm hoping to kind of reconnect with the college community because it's something I've always done, something I've always loved.
Well, it's also kind of the lifeblood of the arts. I think that, so many great things with, music, painting, writing. Let me ask you this. So, with everything you've been doing over the last couple of decades, are you still interested in form writing, with things like, Fibonacci or palindromes or haiku? Or do you kind of feel like you're with it when it comes not so much with short stories or things like that, but with poetry, do you feel like you're more just free verse now, just trying to get it out on the paper while you have the idea fresh?
I'm equally free verse and form. And the processes are completely different. As the problem people have with form is they try to write it like a free verse. And so I'm plugging my book now. The gift of form is that it'll pull a poem out of you. And so I very often will start in form and then say, you know what, this isn't really a formal poem. I'm going to move away from it. But the form draws it out of you. And the one that I use the most is the sonnet. Right now, I'm writing drabbles, which are 100-word short stories, exactly 100 words. And I'm doing that for the state of New York to write about the forest. But the way I start that is with an Italian sonnet, because halfway, a little bit more than halfway through an Italian sonnet, after the eighth line, you get the volta, and which is a shift in thought. And so it allows you to set your readers up for something and then reconsider it, right? And so I read it as a sonnet, and then that's about 10 words longer than 100 words. So I pare it down a little bit and I change it and I work it, and I might work away from the rhyme a little bit because I don't want my prose to be too sing-songy. Not that sonnets are sing, well, right, but it is a different form. and that helps me to get to where I'm going. But I've always loved form. I've always loved free verse, but I think they're completely different. So if I just I'm wandering around, I have an idea. Well, the process of me thinking about that is already creating my own form, which is what free verse is, right?
Mm.
And so that's my free verse poems.
Yeah, maybe this is the same for you. I don't know. For me, I kind of feel like if I tell myself, if I sit down with a pen and paper or in front of a laptop or something, and I say, you know what, I am going to try this form that I've never tried, I, it's just like I don't know if it's just a block or an obstacle, but I always feel like I have to go and find some kind of inspiration online or a prompt or something, and where and just go with that because it's just I have to get that in my mind, and kind of work with the form, build it kind of block by block. Where free verse is just more like okay, and blah blah blah, blah. It just comes out on the page, and it is what it is. I don't know if that's similar or different with you.
Yeah, I'll start with for form, I'll start with a single word, a concrete word or a verb, a concrete noun or a verb, and it'll draw from my subconscious. I'm looking out my window at a shed. So I might start with the word shed, and I'll start writing, and soon I'll realize that there were deep-seated, maybe negative, maybe positive, maybe neither, but deep-seated memories and associations I have with sheds that I wouldn't have really been aware of had I been doing this. And actually, I did do a shed poem once, and it brought me back to could be my earliest memory. It's one of my earliest memories of a pear. Um, and the pear was I was a hard of hearing kid. I was virtually deaf, and so I didn't know where we were. I think was some kind of fruit seller. Um, but somebody handed me a pear. And when you're a kid and you get something, it's special. And this thing was the size of my head. And pears, I probably hadn't had one yet. That was probably my first one. They have such a complex flavor. And so I started eating it and I just kind of got lost in this fruit. And it was that sort of mention of the word shed and the working with form brought that out. And it finally eventually worked into a story. But it was also I've also had it in a poem. But it's this there's so many things in our mind that we are reluctant to go to. We're protecting ourselves, or I'm a very controlling sort of person intellectually, and that keeps me from some of the richer, more important experiences to my life. That pair is probably one of the most important things in my life, or at least it was at the time because I had no communication with other human beings. All I had was this thing, and I was cut off from other senses. So I had the sense of smell and sense of taste, and touch too with that sensation. You know, the pear was cold, but it was also had that interesting grittiness that pears have. That that it's not an apple. It's got that texture that's different than everything else, and being able to lose myself and to sort of appreciate what that moment was for its moment, I think is really important for me.
Mm,
Um, and I'm not sure I can verbalize why, um, which is why we have poetry, right? If I
right.
could verbalize why, I just write an essay. But rather, instead, I recreate the experience of the pair.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, speaking of the mechanics of poetry, I don't know if you have any poems nearby, if you'd like to share one now before I forget to get to that.
Yeah, I have some. Well, I mean, since we're talking about it, let me do a sonnet.
Okay. Sounds
And
good.
this is from my book, Crossing the High Sierra. There's a place called Merton Creek, and it flows all the way from the top or near the top of Alta Peak, which is one of the highest peaks of the High Sierra. It goes all the way down into the valley. And so it's a strange creek because it crosses all these important points, but because they're at different elevations, you don't realize that it's the same creek. It's kind of like, oh, let's go to that creek, and later we'll go to that creek because it's the same creek.
Right.
Anyway, and the trail that goes to Alta Peak is called Alta Trail. On the Alta Trail, almost to Merton Creek, you do not have to speak to be wise, although some might confuse your silence for a lack inside you. Here, the absence of words feels like a miracle, as the grouse waits for you along the path, perched as he is on this 50-foot cliff, listening for his mate. There is no language for his whining call, no point for you to describe his need. So you stand back and shade your eyes. This watching contains a philosophy known only to you. You will never be able to explain it because it's thought beyond thinking. It's the wisdom of grouse or stone or trees. It's the bird calling love again and again.
Wow, that's fantastic. Do
Thank
you
you.
feel that when you're kind of, I always kind of curious about, people's kind of, creative impulses, is that, are you somewhere like, let's say, grocery store, at a mall, or whatever you're doing, and all of a sudden the little lightning zygote of something lands in your head? Are you one of those people that has to just like say, whoever you're with, hold on, and you've got to grab your phone or a napkin or someone's sleeve, and you got to get a pen or something and just get it out right away? Or do you have more of a photographic memory where you think, it's a good idea, I'll get to that later?
Well, if we're getting into education theory, which I always do, in the simplest form, I'm a kinesthetic auditory learner
Okay.
and kinesthetic auditory listener. So I always tell my wife I have no visual imagination whatsoever. And I'll say things like, "You remember that blue two-story house?" And she'll say, "Yeah, but it was yellow and one-story apartment." But, and she'll always be right because she's a visual artist, so she has that memory. And so I kind of have to be doing what you're describing in order to have the good ideas come, which is to be moving, to be
Mm,
walking around the grocery store or something. I do a lot of hiking. That's why I was in Sequoia to begin with, and why I started talking to the rangers and the people up there. And so yeah, I mean, I'm always in motion when I do this. I could be driving, but I keep a notebook with me, which is also a personal journal.
mhm.
And I keep notes just on my life and what I'm thinking. Usually it's mostly a writing journal, but yeah, I kind of have to stop and get it. And once that gets going, because I'm an auditory learner too, I can start to think of it in terms of language, and so I'll hear the music of it. And so it didn't call attention to itself, but that was a sonnet, and so there was a heavy rhyme scheme there in that
That
last
I
poem.
enjoyed it. I have to ask too. Speaking of your wife, have you guys ever been like at a diner or just a dinner at home or something, and you get an idea, and like you're listening to her, or you're in the middle of a conversation, and then just like, can she tell like your demeanor changes when an idea comes to you and something kind of washes over your face? I mean, can you've been together for so long, does she know, and you're just kind of going like this, like scurrying to find something? Is she just going like, just get it out, just write it down?
I am famous for having no poker face, and like my like everybody knows what I'm thinking all the time apparently. And so like I played poker with people, and they'll just look at me and fold, and it's like okay. I had a friend, we used to play two truths and a lie, and I never all my friends always called me on it. So yeah, I mean she'll stop, and one of the ways I work through poems though is to talk through them with her. And
Mm,
so she'll help me with it, and she'll be a sounding board, and say, "Oh yeah, but that part's less interesting than this part. Why don't you go in that direction?" And that'll be good. Or she'll stop, and just because I'm auditory, just speaking it to her kind of locks it in my head. And so I'll be in the middle of like just kind of, oh, let's say what if? And for me it's always what if.
yeah.
And then she'll know, and she'll kind of click into there too, which
Yeah,
is nice. It's great.
I envy you with that sounding board. I don't really know too many people in the area yet. And a couple of times, even talking to friends long distance on the phone, like especially when I do a video editing and things like that, it's so hard to describe what I'm doing when they can't see the pieces. And I'm cutting things together that don't seem like they relate, and I kind of make them work or make them relate either by,
Sure.
a subtitle text on the bottom or music or something and people are just going like, what are you, what the hell? I mean, and I'm like, well, I
Yeah.
try to describe it and say I kind of have a circus for a head, and there's always things going on, and I'm always putting pieces together in my head. And people who see the
Yeah.
pieces, they have no idea what the hell. I mean, people who either are writers or work in the film industry, they kind of get it, but it's kind of like I kind of say with a song, everybody likes the finished product of a 4 minute song or whatever their favorite group is, an album or something. But the hours and hours of tinkering with crap, with just fumbling toward
Yeah.
ecstasy or whatever you want to say, where it's just, I know that there's something there, and people are like, get back to me. So it's so
Yeah.
hard, especially for people who don't do that kind of thing. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you have people
What?
like that in your life that just go, just get back to me when it's done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got that skill set that nobody else has, and so like they wouldn't understand what you're talking about or what you're thinking. And so like anytime you've got a skill like that, I remember there was an interview with Stephen Colbert where he was talking to David Letterman about how the theater's set up, and they said, "Well, I've never talked to anybody about this because who else would understand what I'm saying?" You
Yeah.
know, which is interesting. I certainly wouldn't. And
Yeah.
or when I'm talking teaching with people, it's like, well, you don't know why I'm doing this, and why would you? Why would you care? You
It's
know?
like I tell people, and maybe you've done the same thing, where it's just like, even when I'm telling people about the podcast and about how I'll cut together with stock footage, some like a fun intro, and then I'll put people's links to their website or their magazine or their Instagram, and I'll put like a little funny little vignette in there, and people will say,
Hmm.
"Well, why are you wasting your time? Why would you do that?" And I say like, "Well, if someone texts me or calls me and say, 'Oh, I like the thing that you did in the credits,' I went, so you also saw the guest's website and links to everything, and they go,
Uh-huh.
"Oh, oh, that's not a waste of time." Right, right. Well, let me ask you this before I gotta make this about you. How important is immersing into a writing or open mic community to new writers or performers, do you think?
I think it's not only important to new writers, I think it's important to all writers always. And okay, so I'm going back to teaching. So the most depressing question I ever got from anybody was I had a student who asked me, "Do you think it's realistic for me to be a writer? To think I could be a writer?" And of course, it's realistic for you to think you could be. It's like anything else. But of course, he was outside the community,
Mhm.
and he was looking in, and he was thinking, "Okay, this is some kind of special magic thing." He wasn't. He didn't have. He didn't have. He didn't have a group of people. He didn't have a support system, and so there was nobody. It's very easy to, as any kind of artist, to start getting down on yourself and thinking this what I'm doing right now has no relevance unless you've got some kind of sounding board and people going, "Oh, I get that. I understand what you're doing." Because what we're writing about is our deepest sort of individual feelings, they seem um, cut off, isolated from everybody else. But the one of the magic pieces of writing is to find out that you're not alone. And somebody has gone through this. It's like, oh my God. That's why I love new voices, right?
Mhm.
I've gone through what they've gone through, yes, but also they're going through it in a different way. So I can reevaluate and re-understand. And so yeah, I think it's really important for people to get into that community, um, to know that they're doing something that matters, that has some kind of import, and also to know that when they need to course correct a little bit, right? And I've done both of those things, and it's great. And so I still meet with my writing group. It's really important to have a writing group. I always have. I have 5 people that I meet with. Uh, it's hard for me because I have so many students that everybody kind of thinks of me as dad, and so I've got a group of writers that I meet with, of whom they're all except for one person, they're all older than I am, and so they don't think of me as dad. Thank God. They can just talk to me like I'm a human being,
Yeah.
uh, which is nice. It's a nice change of pace.
Um,
And
Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, please.
Oh, I was just going to add on to that and say, in encouraging new writers or open mic performers or just, in general, do you still kind of encourage these people to self-publish, like, a chapbook for just starting out, or do you think that that as a form has kind of gone by the wayside?
I think when you're thinking of goals, you need to when you think about publishing, you need to think of goals. And I think the best goal you can come up with is something in the far, far distance that feels unrealistic to you. Because that word realistic, just like my students said, do you think it's realistic for me? That thing is filtered through your pain.
Hmm.
And so you think, well, is it realistic for yes, it's realistic for you. Yes, everything is realistic. So think of that thing that you want more than anything. Make it very specific and make it very distant. So a lot of people will say, well, I don't know, I guess I want to win a Nobel Prize. And I would say, do you? I don't think you do. Very few people do actually want to win a Nobel Prize because the work of the Nobel Prize is about society. It's about, it's about social change. It's about seeing things differently. Now, if you want the Nobel Prize, I say go for it
Right.
because even if you don't get the Nobel Prize, you have named those things that matter to you. And everything you do, getting closer to that Nobel Prize matters, right? It has significance. So for me, for a long time, as I said I want to be the poet laureate of California because I like working with people. I like writing. Love writing about California. I love seeing California. It's not anymore. I've moved away from California. And I never became poet laureate, but it helped me distinguish what absolutely mattered to me. And it was everything I did. So now, okay, so I'm thinking poet laureate of California. Is that going to help me is self-publishing a chapbook going to help me get to there? No, right? And so why not only is it not going to help, it's not going to like feed my soul. However, if you want to be a romance novelist,
Hmm.
at this point, I believe you have to self-publish first. Is it important for you to self-publish? Yes, you absolutely have to. You have to do it and you have to do it well. If there are various reasons that you would self-publish, and it will help you to get to your goal. More importantly, it'll clarify what matters to you.
Hmm.
I wrote a suspense novel that was published, and only afterward did I realize that it was merely interesting. It wasn't necessary for me. It's not a very good suspense novel either. It's merely interesting. And so doing that didn't feed me. And so will I do another suspense novel? No, I'll read tons of them. I love them. I think they're fantastic, but I won't write one because it's only interesting. It's too much time commitment, too much. I'm denying those things that actually do matter to me.
Right.
And there are a lot of reasons to self-publish. All of them should be part of like who you are and what your journey is and what you see your journey is as. Um, I think, yeah, some people self-publish very well. Some people self-publish badly. You also have to think when you're doing that, okay, so what are my dreams, all of that stuff. But also, I'm engaging in the business of writing now. What is the purpose of this in terms of business? I feel terribly guilty when I publish something with a publisher and it doesn't sell very well. So so when I'm self-publishing, I only have to be angry with myself.
Right.
Uh, but I feel like I owe the publisher something.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah,
that's good. I agree wholeheartedly. Could we have you read another poem here? We're a few
yeah.
minutes left here, so I want to make sure we at least get another one in here from you.
Well, I did a sonnet before, and this is a free verse poem. And this is from my collection, My Dead. And I did that with Jane Edberg. She did the art, and I did the poetry. It's called Their Dance Probably. I waked this morning to the sound of my dead whispering in the rain that falls on my roof. I can hear them, almost, telling me things that probably matter. I can see them, almost, flitting behind the patterns of raindrops on the window pane. Their dance probably means something too, but they can wait for a while. I will be with them soon enough.
Wow,
Thank you.
pretty powerful stuff. Thank you for that. This is a fun one, and I always love asking people this question that are writers that have performed their work. So, what is a crazy open mic experience that you had where you asked yourself, "What the hell is going on here?"
Oh, let's see. Oh, geez. I'm trying to think of all the times that I have done something incredibly stupid in front of a group of people. There's been a lot, I started reading in my 20s. And I'd show up. I think I showed up in a suit once and barefoot. We did an open mic. It was sex reading. And they stuck us in the bookstore. They knew about it beforehand. They knew what the reading was, but they stuck us in the children's section. And I mean, it was 9 o'clock at night, but still, it was a sex theme reading, and it's like not the right place for it. And eventually, the sheriff was called.
Oh God.
Um, and so, luckily, I was out of there by that time. But it was a series of really unfortunate kind of combinations of things, like people bringing their children out way too late at night, I think.
Oh, God.
But also, you should be able to take your kid out at night and not hear about somebody's sexual fantasies.
Oh my
Uh,
God. I can only imagine, people walking around and picking up toys while they're reading.
yeah,
Then it just turns into it goes from PG to X-rated real fast.
yeah, and I think what it was is the person who knew what we were doing booked us, and then when we got there, she wasn't there, so they said, "Oh, there's a reading that's good space over there." And it's like,
Like,
maybe not
yeah,
so
no one
much.
ever goes in there after 9 o'clock. I'm sure it's fine until it's not fine.
Yeah, that's right. And some
Um,
parent is
well, let's see if we can get another poem in here for you before we wrap it up here.
okay. All right. Let's see here. You want new or old?
It doesn't matter, whatever you're feeling. And then for
Okay, this is a very
everybody
old one.
watching, happy Valentine's Day. This is going to air on the 14th, so I wanted to put that out there before I forgot.
Yeah, I don't write love poetry very well.
Me
So
neither. I'm terrible at it.
oh, actually, what am I saying? I've got a love poem right here. Um, I don't think of it as a love poem, but it certainly is. So I retract what I just said.
Well,
Okay,
hey,
so this
Sid and
is
Nancy is a love story, right?
that's right. This one ends better than that. This is called Agenda. Darling, this summer, let's walk down the spine of the Sierra Nevada mountains, tightrope them on the John Muir Trail, despite the fact that the doctors 30 years ago said you would be in a wheelchair today. I want to hike with you through Evolution Valley, which everyone says is the most beautiful place on earth, so we can watch the golden eagles laze clockwise 100 feet above turkey vultures doing their counterclockwise dance. And I don't care what it takes, even if it means I carry your gear. And later, I want to watch you paint your paintings and change the way the world sees a flower. Even though when we talk about art, so many people raise their eyebrows and look away. And I don't care if they're laughing either. I want to go with you to that spot on Big Sur where all those people would never go anyway, and stare at you while you sketch until I can tell you're uncomfortable, and then I'll pretend not to stare. But we'll both know. Let's listen to jazz no one else likes and go to movies everyone else calls pretentious. I want to go back to London with you and take us both to Kyoto for the first time. I want to learn the language of the Tongva people and go back to college when we're 60 to become the archaeologist Indiana Jones dreamed us into. This spring, I want to sit on a train with you in the Mojave Desert and sip dirty martinis, watching for coyotes to poke their heads up out of the scrub and smile at us. They get us, they understand. And even if they don't, I want to listen to them with you as they sing The Stars Awake.
Nice. Fantastic. All right. Well, as we wrap it up here, I'll ask a few questions just to kind of get some stuff out of here. So, I did not mention the Journal of Radical Wonder. You can talk about that a little bit. Also, what's coming up next for you and where people can find your work online and reach out to you.
Okay. Okay. So the Journal of Radical Wonder, we're kind of putting on hiatus for a little while. So, but maybe just talk about what's coming up. I'm going to be teaching at Chautauqua institutions. Some of it's going to be completely free. Some of it is that expensive Chautauqua stuff, you know. So if you're from this area, you know, it's kind of like an arts Disneyland, and it kind of costs that much money to walk into the place too.
Wow.
So you get not that much money, but it's for the day it's like $50 or something. It's too much.
Yeah.
But once you walk in, you get all the programming for free. So you walk in, then you watch Salman Rushdie and then a symphony for that price. So it ends up being a good deal, but it is expensive. But I'll be doing stuff before and after the season there for absolutely free, and I hope that people come. And what else can they can find and connect with me on johnbrantingham.com. And if you want to email me, M as in Michael, John M. Brantingham at gmail.com. And I'm always looking to connect with people. And I'm on Facebook way too much because I'm, Gen X and old. And I like to say dumb things and talk poetry with people. So please connect with me. I'm happy to talk to anybody.
Ah!